I'm the first Muslim mayor of our city. Anti-Muslim bigotry is nothing new to me, nor is it anything new for the 1 million or so Muslim New Yorkers who know this city as our home.
12 seconds later.
This is being investigated as an act of ISIS-inspired terrorism. Preliminary test results determined that these were not hoax devices nor smoke bombs. They were improvised explosive devices that could have caused serious injury or death.
So let's follow up on the whole situation in New York City, because yesterday we covered how Mamdani had offered what was basically a moral justification for Islamic terrorism and political violence, of course, by blaming right-wingers and their bigotry for the attacks, despite the fact that it was literally a group of violent radical Muslims who threw the nail bomb at right-wingers. But much like leftists said that Charlie Kirk deserved it because he had right-wing views, that is essentially the same logic that Mamdani is employing here. And I want people to understand it's not him just trying to cover up or misinform about the story. That's what this is really about. Much like his radical left base, he is ultimately making a moral justification for violence against right-wingers. And when you read through the lines of his statement, that part becomes extremely clear. And keep in mind, this is not some random person on Reddit. We are talking about the elected mayor of the largest city in the United States of America, justifying and making excuses for political and terroristic religious violence against right-wingers. But we do have some updates as of today, because on one hand, the federal government is telling him not so fast. A major concern I posed, given the way that Mamdani was speaking about the situation and what we know about Alvin Bragg, is the possibility that the New York City government might try to basically let these attackers out of jail. They're going to say, oh, they were just kids, disorderly conduct. You know, they definitely did not try to engage in attempted murder and terrorism. But as of today, it appears that these Muslim suspects are now in federal custody, which will bar New York City from playing the typical woke prosecutor games here. But we do have even more information about the situation. It is now being confirmed that this does appear to be an ISIS-inspired terror attack. But of course, Mamdani's likely probably going to say that ISIS are, Trump-supporting white supremacists or something like that. But of course, while the federal government is doing its best job to make sure that these attackers face consequences, I would point out that Mamdani's political rhetoric does appear to be having effects all around the city, where we're still seeing brand new terror threats and bomb scares in New York, and frankly, even in other parts of the country there. And after all, that shouldn't be all that surprising. Again, when you have political leaders who openly justify and make defenses for these types of things, you shouldn't be all that surprised when you seem to get more of it. So we'll talk about all of this here today. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. We greatly appreciate the support, but it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And let's start here by confirming what we now know about these suspects. So on one hand, it is known that both of the jihadis here had parents who were naturalized U.S. citizens. So in other words, what are they? Second generation immigrants who were imported to this country on a voluntary basis. As I said, this is the big security concern, is not necessarily that we're just starting wars or fighting in the Middle East. It's the fact that you do that and then bring over a bunch of people to this country who hate you. One came from Turkey. The other folks came from Afghanistan. And I guess that shouldn't be all that surprising. We know that on one hand, and what we secondly know, yes, is that these attacks were inspired by ISIS, as the radical quote-unquote white supremacists, according to Zohran Mamdani, had shouted Allahu Akbar. Take a listen.
Emir Balat and Ibrahim Qayyumi are now reportedly in federal custody, being interviewed by the FBI in connection to the devices. Our Bill Malusian has learned that Balat's parents are naturalized U.S. citizens from Turkey, and Qayyumi's parents are naturalized citizens from Afghanistan. One of the suspects was captured saying this as he was taken into custody.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Yes, somebody on the other side.
So the confirmed IED, the one that we know has been tested and confirmed to be an explosive, well, that was thrown yesterday afternoon outside Gracie Mansion during a clash of protest. The initial protest was called Stop the Islamic Takeover of New York City, Stop New York City Public Muslim Prayer.
Multiple sources telling CNN that both men that were arrested following these protests in relation to those two explosive devices admitted to having been inspired by ISIS. Now, I also want to add that last night when the police commissioner briefed the media on this incident, she did say that the investigation was still underway, and she emphasized that so far there appeared to be no nexus to the situation unfolding in Iran. So I just want to mention those two things right off the bat, because we are learning that while these two men said that they were inspired by ISIS, the commissioner did say last night that this incident did not specifically have a nexus to Iran. However, she did say the investigation is ongoing.
Now, of course, I'm sure some people might try to say that, well, they appear to be natural-born U.S. citizens, so what's the issue here? Why are you making it an immigration debate? Well, I would point out, because we're only talking about the second generation. I mean, I think when you examine the impacts of immigration, you have to consider at least 2 to 3 generations of what's going to happen, right? Because the immigrants don't just get here and then magically disappear. They raise kids, they raise families in this country. We have to be asking the question of what kind of kids and what kind of families will they be raising in the country? You know, it'd be one thing if the great-great-great-grandkid of an Ellis Islander comes over, is living here, I should say, and commits a crime or something like that. At that point, you could say, sure, fair enough. There's a long enough distance between the past immigration and this to say, yeah, we can't blame German or Italian immigration on something that happened in 2026. But no, when you're directly still born to immigrant parents, I think it is an open question. Hey, how did you raise the kids, essentially, to be radical jihadis? Legal or not, the overall point here is what? Through stupid immigration policies, we have allowed this stuff en masse to flood into our country. Second excuse you might hear is that, well, it has nothing to do with Iran, and that part is true if it's connected to ISIS, because the Iranians are Shia Muslims, ISIS are Sunni. They pretty famously and notoriously hate each other. But look, I will still point out this is coming at a time when obviously the Islamic world has reasons to be angry still, regardless, right? Reasons to be agitated and violent overall. And so, you know, you could say at the same time, you know, either way, we're not just talking about Iranian sleeper cells as a whole. Yes, the problem of radical Islamic sleeper cells in general is a problem in this country. And as I said, right, when you're talking about the current conflict in the Middle East and those people who say, I don't like what's happening because it's a distraction from Trump's domestic agenda, I say to that, doesn't need to be that way, right? Actually, I think the fact that we have this whole thing going on, and obviously there will be Muslims in this country who get radicalized, is an even bigger reason to consider, yeah, let's ramp up deportations because it's currently a national security issue. You understand? That's something, by the way, I thought the Bush administration should have done after 9/11. You know, you could have used that as an opportunity, and a righteous one at that, to solve the immigration crisis back then. But instead he says, you know, let's just entirely focus on the Middle East and pass the Patriot Act instead of confronting the core problem, which is a foreign ideology that's being brought into this country by foreign people. So there you have that on one hand. I secondly would like to point out relating this back to Mamdani, right? The overall justifications and ridiculousness from the left that you see on the issue of political violence, because it does turn out that Walt Masterson, this is a liberal quote-unquote comedian and commentator that you may be well familiar with, apparently attended that leftist Islamic counter-protest against the right-wing rally yesterday, and in perhaps the most ironic, fitting left-wing moment you might ever see, he was apparently on the megaphone saying, and I quote, "As a born and raised New Yorker, we welcome everyone into this city," arguably trying to say, oh, we're tolerant, we want everyone, leftist diversity, something like that. As the terrorists, like as he's saying that, came here and threw the nail bomb over his head and at the right-wingers. Really sums up a lot, right?
We were born and raised in New York, and we want everyone here to stay in New York. You don't get to come from outside and then tell everyone else.
I mean, again, there is no greater symbol of modern leftism than that video right there. You have this woke idiot trying to say that we accept everyone. We believe in diversity. We're tolerant. And then as he is saying that, one of his allies in the radical Islamic Jihad literally just comes over and throws an IED into the very crowd of right-wingers that he's speaking to, right? So they're literally saying, we believe in tolerance while they're throwing active bombs at people. And ladies and gentlemen, if you think that this was a reality check for Walter Masterson, he's apologetic. He's so sorry that he ever got involved in this. His public response thus far has been the exact opposite. As a matter of fact, he is just mocking the right-wingers for what happened to them, right? You see right here, he's saying, and I still stand by it. As a born and raised New Yorker, everyone is welcome except for cheat goat effer Jake Lang, that is the right-winger who organized this protest. And then he goes on to state, keep in mind, it's confirmed by NYPD. First of all, you saw it on video, right? It was smoking. No one knew if the fuse was going to explode or not. But this was an improvised explosive device. It was a nail bomb intended to hurt and potentially kill people. It's not just some innocent prank, right? It's not just throwing a smoke bomb to mess with people. No, this was intended to blow up. And his response to it is what? To actually just mock the right-wingers for fleeing the scene and getting scared. Apparently, I guess you could say his amygdala or whatever at the part of his brain that just does not, that is supposed to process stress and fight or flight, clearly has no fear here of the Islamic terrorists, because he states the following: I cannot stress enough, it was right near our feet and it did not look real. We just stood there laughing. Meanwhile, the incel femoids run away, having been totally jester mogged. Their cortisol levels have yet to recover. So again, he's just mocking the whole situation. He's making fun of the right-wingers. Keep in mind, while, of course, all he's admitting here is he's a complete idiot who has no survival instincts, because the NYPD does know and confirm it was a real explosive device. And all he's going to sit here and say is he's going to make fun of it, mock the right-wingers for getting scared, and, of course, like, not even condemn what this guy did. So again, when I say that the left wing makes moral justifications for mass political violence, we're not exaggerating that. This is not an issue of, oh, you just called us a fascist and then someone started shooting people, so that's what it means. No, you see the way they directly react to instances of political violence like this right here. That's all we have to say. So, you know, if you think there's any separation between the woke idiot on the microphone and the Islamic terrorist who threw the bomb, his public response, in my opinion, says it all. So what an absolute idiot this guy is. But all of that said, so the current state of this prosecution, as I brought up in the beginning, is that these suspects are now in federal custody, which will block the leftist Mamdani Bragg government from freeing them or pretending as if it was just an innocent prank. It was just a smoke bomb, even though our own NYPD is saying the opposite. Take a listen for yourself.
Emir Balat and Ibrahim Qayyumi are reportedly in federal custody and now being interviewed by the FBI in connection to the devices. A source tells us both are U.S. citizens, and right now we're monitoring more police activity in an area of New York City's Upper East Side, near where the devices were initially thrown yesterday afternoon. Cameras captured 6 total people taken into custody yesterday, including one of them who said, Allah Akbar.
So that's certainly good news, and frankly, I wish we could do this for every instance of crime that takes place in a liberal city, because we are surrendering our country to violent criminals and terrorists simply because of the fact that woke judges and woke prosecutors are saying, well, yeah, you may have committed 70 different violent crimes, but we think you deserve another chance to go terrorize society again. You know, it is a very small fraction of repeat offenders in society that have basically destroyed public safety in every major city in this country. And at a certain point, maybe you have to question whether the so-called federalism here was a mistake. Like, at a certain, I don't know, do we need a national crime bill or something? I'm just saying, to go in and say, no, this is not going to happen in some way or another. Anyways, all of that said, so again, good news on that front. But I will point out that likely thanks to the rhetoric that we're hearing from left-wingers like Mamdani, like Walt Masterson, who are morally justifying and comedically mocking the whole situation, I would point out that across the city in the past 24 to 48 hours, we have only seen more suspicious devices and potential IED bomb scares taking place all around the city, including one just several blocks away from where the first attack took place. So in other words, right, a domino chain effect here is taking place where likely a lot more people are trying to plant suspicious devices and potentially even more scares.
We continue to follow a developing situation outside Gracie Mansion, the official home of New York City's mayor, who at this time is Zohran Mamdani. The NYPD says it is now investigating a suspicious device found inside a vehicle. This comes after 2 men were arrested yesterday for throwing improvised explosive devices during 2 dueling protests near the mayor's mansion. Sources tell Fox News those devices were made with a dangerous material used in some very high-profile terror attacks. Fox News contributor Paul Morrow joins us once again on the phone. I suppose it is no surprise to you, Paul, that if there were a couple of devices that were thrown yesterday, that leaving a device in a car or a truck nearby might also have been part of the operation here.
Yeah, no surprise there, John. It tracks to things that we've seen in the past, certain ones that I'm sure the public recalls well, like, for instance, the Boston Marathon bombing, when the Tsarnaev brothers were actually fleeing from the police. Once they'd been discovered, they had all kinds of other devices that they were actually literally throwing out the back of the truck at investigators as they were being pursued. So I don't know what the plan was of these 2 guys, but my gut tells me that almost certainly this is connected to the events that we saw yesterday. They wouldn't be undertaking the evacuations that they're undertaking now if they didn't have strong indicia of potentially live devices in the car. And it is likely down to either some follow-on event that they wanted to do, or perhaps, as I said, something that they reasoned they might have to fight their way out. And very fortuitously, the police that were there responded very quickly and grabbed them, and very fortuitously, the devices didn't detonate.
Yeah, we understand that there are evacuations going on right now in some of the nearby buildings. That suggests that the bomb squad thinks that whatever device they've got here could create a pretty powerful blast.
So to recap, a total of 3 devices have been recovered in this neighborhood since yesterday afternoon. 2 of the devices were ignited and thrown yesterday during dueling protests near Gracie Mansion, where New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani lives. Thankfully, no one was hurt. But we've learned from high-level sources that one of the devices contained a powerful explosive known as TATP. Fox News contributor Paul Morrow says this is an explosive that has been used in other high-profile, deadly terrorist attacks across the globe.
New York City got extremely lucky yesterday. TATP is enormously volatile. It is not very stable. It's extremely powerful. And it is the footprint, and if you go by past events, of serious bombing attacks. The London 7/7 attacks, Richard Reed's attempt on a plane.
So yeah, not just 1, but now 3 potential bomb scares that took place around New York City. But according to Walt Masterson, let's not forget, it was just a giant prank and he was standing around laughing and nobody thought it was serious. Turns out it was pretty serious. And going back to the point about the size of his amygdala, I want people to understand I'm not really trying to be comedic when I say that. There's actually been social science that does try to study this and concluded that liberals actually do have smaller amygdalas than conservatives in their brain, right? Again, that's the part of the brain that processes danger, fear, fight or flight. And I will say, I think it summarizes so much about their politics. It actually is so fitting that the left-wing crowd stood there and saw no danger as this was happening, and the right-wing crowd ran away. You know why that is? Because leftists do not know danger when it looks them in the face. This is the exact reason, for example, why politically they support oh, we stand with the illegal aliens, we support refugees and all this stuff, and the right-wingers are saying, danger, danger, danger. You know why? Because they have properly formed amygdalas. We understand, we can see that when it confronts us, and of course, when the so-called refugees run around our societies, committing crimes, sexual assaults, terrorist attacks, mass stabbings, we know what we're seeing. We warned you, we told you from the beginning. But the leftists still sit there and say, oh, I don't really see the problem here. Again, same reason, by the way, their criminal justice policies, like that of Alvin Bragg, exist in the way they do, right? Keep on letting the criminals out of jail. No, they deserve a second chance. They're really a good guy. They didn't do nothing. What do conservatives say? Danger, danger, danger. And so that's why, frankly, I think on key issues like immigration and crime that seem so straightforward to us, why leftists genuinely don't get it. And why they're just still this insane to this very day, you know, despite any claims that, oh, maybe Biden went too far on the border. No, they still don't really process or understand why that was such a big problem. Despite massive public backlash, they're still largely committed to the same insane criminal justice policies in their own cities, because this is what it is all about. So, you know, as the left sits there and laughs at it and just morally justifies it again, I'm just going to say, well, you know, take notes of who seems to be scared of the very real threat of political violence and radical terrorism and who is not, you know, sums up a lot. But I'm sure, you know, you could always blame it on the right-wingers, I suppose. They're clearly the ones who were doing the violence here. Yeah, totally. Utterly ridiculous, guys. But all of that said, let me know your thoughts about this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.